My name is Brian Danzis. I'm the managing director of Seedtag. If you don't know who Seedtag is, we are a contextual AI platform out of Madrid, Spain. And we're very excited to be here at Brand Innovators this week. I've really enjoyed getting to know Vivan over the last couple of days here and learning about her business, and hopefully we'll have a great conversation.
Yeah.
So Vivan, tell us a little bit about your career journey and how you got to Clorox and where you've been, what you've seen, and how that's kind of fueled your strategy and what you're doing today.
Yeah, for sure. Good morning, afternoon, everyone. Good to see a crowd show up on the last day of Brand Innovators. So I'll start first with what I do with Clorox, and kind of work backwards, I guess. So I run direct-to-consumer within Clorox, which means that we are building the capability to actually be able to transact our products to consumers within a legacy CPG. So historically, Clorox has always relied on retailers, Amazon, Target, Costco, so forth. And so my team comes in and builds the actual infrastructure and then also brings a lot of the D2C growth marketing playbook in to expand on the businesses. And so we work on brands such as Burt's Bees. There's a bunch of vitamin supplements brands, Brita water filters, and then in the summer of this year, launched shop.clorox.com, so the actual bleach brand. So I, though, am not a CPG, I didn't come up in CPG. There's a lot of folks who spend their entire careers in that space. I came from startups, so was in search marketing at the very beginning of when search marketing was a thing, and then moved on to mobile app marketing, helped launch Retail Me Not's first ever app, did that space for a long time, and then was most recently at Plated, kind of like a meal kit, Blue Apron competitor, running acquisition marketing. And so my background is from digital. It is kind of that blend of the analytical quantitative side and then also the how do we reach consumer side of things. And so coming into Clorox, the goal really is to drive change from the inside, help them understand how do we start to innovate in ways both in processes and ways to think about problems, and then obviously the technology foundation of actually being able to have that one-to-one consumer relationship.
I'm sure it's a fascinating journey, and we're going to get into that. But tell me, what were you thinking about when you decided to make this leap? Clorox is a 100-year-old company. Started out, the primary product, bleach products, right? They made this acquisition of Nutranext in 2018 and placed that bet on DTC. For you, what was that like, making that decision to join a big company like Clorox?
Yeah, I think on one side is really that passion to push for change across the industry, and my belief is that you do need folks on the inside who are helping to show on a day-to-day basis a reframe of how things have been done. And so that's really the reason why I'm at Clorox, why I've stayed there for 3.5 years at this point, but that was a draw. But then also, so Nutranext was a group of vitamins and supplements brands. And so we actually initially came in with the idea to launch new wellness brands, pure direct-to-consumer, not going through retail channels, which on the one hand, you have the CPG benefits of R&D and innovation and supply chain, and then layer that on with an in-house team that we were building that has our product people, engineers, growth marketers, data, and so forth. And so that marriage was really appealing to me. Without some of the risk of launching a new startup. And so that was actually what we did for the first year and a half, and then pivoted along the way to be more of what I'm doing now, which is building core capability.
Right, so you had a lot of resources to work with. What are some of the things you didn't have that you needed to build?
We essentially built the team from scratch. And so The traditional CPG model is much more, you rely on agencies, you outsource the work, and maybe have like a brand marketer, one person kind of lead all of the media planning side of it. On our side for direct-to-consumer, we have a strong bias and hypothesis that you need folks who actually have hands-on keyboard expertise and looking at the data and in a daily basis to action on the results. And so we had to, one, completely build that team and then figure out how do we work within the infrastructure and the tools and the systems that Clorox has.
Did you ever get any pushback internally or say, Vivian, you can't do that?
Yeah. I think to Clorox's credit, it's a 100-plus-year-old company, but the executive team has always been committed to knowing that they need to change, and they also recognize that they don't know what they don't know. And so we've had a good amount of rope to define what that roadmap needs to look like, and it wasn't the expectation of, okay, tomorrow we have to be, competitive with Walmart to not have funding cut. And I think that's really important. That was one of the big reasons why I joined, is that they're committed to it. What is challenging and continues to be challenging on a day-to-day basis is it's not that people are against the idea, it's that they don't know how to break their own process or to see the silos that they've created. And so it's constantly trying to inch the organization towards that in ways that they can still be comfortable. So it's a lot of give and take and trying to find really small nuggets of wins. And one of the nice things of working across brands is we can take a small win on Burt's Bees where the process is changing and we're seeing success, and then go have that conversation with the cleaning team and say, hey, let's staff in this way and test it out for Clorox, and kind of be able to do that.
And what were some of those early successes? How did you know, when did it click that you saw a key metric or piece of consumer feedback that you knew you were on the right path?
A lot of it is on, I think, consumer insights and getting that real-time feedback back from consumers of, hey, we're having that. They love the product. We get a ton of testimonials and/or really enjoying the customer service experience. The other piece was really just trying to show the organization the scale of test and learn. So I think Clorox and legacy companies talk a lot about, we want to test and iterate, but it's not like they're doing multivariate tests, multiple at a time, like we could. And so being aligned to their goals, but also being able to show results much, much faster was a key metric of success. I think what's hard actually was we started out thinking that revenue and sales and top line metrics, that top line revenue was the goal, and it became much more challenging as you don't have as many levers at our disposal with pricing and promotions. You have to stay with MAP policy and so forth. And so that's where kind of the pivot has been to look at insights and testing and innovation. How are we creating that stronger one-to-one consumer relationship?
Right, and did you have to communicate those goals to a retailer that may have been a little concerned, a Walmart or a Target, that you could be eating into their profitability?
Yeah, so I think there was a lot of concern internally from the sales team when we launched direct-to-consumer, because they thought it was a threat to revenue that consumers might otherwise be purchasing from the retailer. The reality of it is that we're not going to. Revenue is not the place that we're going to compete on direct consumer. A lot of people, if you're shopping at Target and you have a cart, you're going to put in bleach and just transact there. It's so much easier that way. And so instead, we're thinking about direct to consumer as a platform for testing. How do we launch exclusive products? How do we have R&D and innovation before we even have the on-the-shelf conversation with retailers? We're able to show, hey, this is the type of consumer and their demographic demographics that are really purchasing. We can pivot and make adjustments to the actual innovation itself or test pricing and promotions. And we actually go to the sales conversations with that data. So it becomes, here's the reasons to believe that you should carry this product, this new product on your shelf because we've already validated it for you in a smaller way. And bonus, we have the email journey built out. We have paid marketing support. And we're going to amplify not just sales on direct to consumer, but to the retailers themselves. And so direct to consumer within CPG, I think is very different than for a pure startup where it's just about revenue. For us, it's more, in fact, on our product detail pages, you can buy obviously from the brand itself. We also allow you very easily to look at the pricing on Amazon, on Walmart.com, on Target, because we are agnostic on where the consumer shops. It's more about driving that engagement through the branded website. And I think all of those things help make the retailers more comfortable. It's really like, how do we partner to drive 1 + 1 = 3 instead of fighting about incrementality?
Yeah, that was one of the most fascinating takeaways I had. That look, everyone wants net new revenue, but you're looking at it a whole different area to fuel the business and the insights and the R&D. It's fascinating. Let's talk a little bit about, because this conference we've talked about cookie deprecation, we've talked about the rise of contextual, privacy concerns. Google just had a massive fine they paid out a couple of weeks ago. You've got 5 new states. They're adding their own version of GDPR. There's legislation making its way through Congress, which could be federalized soon. How does, obviously Clorox, I assume, takes consumer privacy very important. How do you approach it? How do you ensure that you are protecting the consumer and ensuring that their data is well protected?
Yeah, it's a great, challenging question. I think kind of go back, 5-7 years ago, not just Clorox, but almost all CPG companies had no first-party data. It was entirely reliant on the retailer to own that transaction, to own understanding the consumer, and that's been a big pivot, I think, because of things like cookie deprecation, for Clorox to recognize, hey, we actually need to own our own relationships. And so there's been a huge push on how do we build out that pool, and direct to consumer happens to be the source where you can have closed loop understanding of someone who transacts on the site. They're generally opted into things like email and SMS, and we're able to have that be the core audience targeting for then lookalikes or modeling the audience. So that's a big part of it. And I think we're continuing to say, how do we shift from things like third-party data, which is shaky at best on its quality, and move more towards first-party data? And then beyond that, how do we actually enhance our zero-party data? So one example, recently for our stress supplements brand, we actually asked our existing base to complete a 15-question survey. I was a little bit worried that 15 questions feels like a lot, in exchange for a 50% coupon. It was timed around election, talking about hey, we recognize this is a stressful period, want to better understand your preferences, how can we help you? We got an 80% completion rate on those surveys, and very high coupon redemption. So it checked the box of, we got bonus revenue because people were redeeming product. Yes, not as strong of margin as we would like, but for the value of also then knowing those consumers way beyond things like just location and so forth. And now we can continue to enrich our data pool, and so that's a lot of what we were doing. But I think we were also talking, what are other sources of targeting that's not just relying on cookie and first-party data? I think that's actually where I think the stuff that you guys are doing is interesting to me.
And when you're leveraging that data, are you thinking about creative? Are you thinking about different types of placements? Does it vary by channel? How are you using that to improve the consumer experience from start to finish?
I think we're still figuring it out. I don't know that there is a right answer. So absolutely on the channels we can, like a Facebook or Google, we're doing lookalike audience targeting. But then there's also balancing that with letting the algorithm find the consumer for you and having creative be what differentiates. And so we're constantly kind of along that path. I think the creative piece is probably the most challenging. How do you create enough variation and actually have creative do the segmentation for us in a way for where someone is shopping, where they are in that journey, and being able to really do that like right message, right person, right time. That's honestly where I'm really excited for new vendors, new AI type tools to amplify what we might be able to do as an in-house team or even an agency team. I think we need technology to be able to reach that kind of scale in a one-to-one basis with consumers now.
I think I know of a company that can help you with that. So yeah. Anything surprise you along this journey? Whether it was a particular channel or a consumer insight, what happened that you might not have expected?
It's more surprises than not, I'd say. I think we went in with a lot of optimism of like build direct to consumer, build a platform, and they will come. Not true. Consumers have their normal behavior, and they're not automatically going to just change it. And so I think it's taken us having these like tough conversations where this omni approach where we're saying, hey, brand.com website is not just about revenue and sales, but there's so much power in that first party data from the innovation testing, and sharing that back with the business unit is actually much more valuable. That took a couple year journey to actually like get there. And we're still at the point where we're trying to really quantify what is the value, a dollar value against each of those things. So I think that was the surprise, first of all, because it's not coming from direct-to-consumer startup where that's the end-all be-all. It was always revenue. It's always about customer acquisition costs, LTV, and those things were default, and that's not applicable really in the CPG world. So I think that's a big piece of it. But also really figuring out how do we transform every piece. I think that's the other part, is bringing direct-to-consumer into the brand isn't just like, okay, it's on the silo, now you have a team that's working on the website. It fundamentally changes how you do marketing planning, how you do financial planning, how do you understand consumer insights. And so that's the journey. I think that's the surprise. It's also the challenge that we're in the midst of, but really excited at like, hey, if we get this right, the potential is huge.
Yeah. Are there brands that you want to bring to a DTC model that are on your radar for next year?
So we're trying to be really diligent and almost educating the business units of thinking about, you have to have a strong value proposition before you launch direct to consumer. It's not just like throw your full assortment of SKUs out there and not have any kind of like guided selling. That like does not work, and it's not worth the resources. And so for the Clorox.com launch that we did in the summer, it was based off of the insight, okay, we want to target Gen Z, millennial, younger consumers who are overwhelmed when they go to a Target and they look at the shelf of cleaning products. Like, do I really need a different wipe for bathroom, kitchen, and like what laundry product do I choose? And so on the website, we have a lot more like surveys and guided selling, super simple, like build your own bundle, pick something from kitchen, laundry, and so forth. And so, that was a value prop that's actually like beneficial to the target audience, and so it's a much narrower set than the full assortment. And then I think the same thing applies for future brands. One, it has to make financial sense. We're not going to ship 50-pound bags of charcoal briskets to consumers.
Hardwood pellets, though, I tell you, those are a great product. The flavors that you have.
That's exactly it, right? So it's like what kind of product innovation can we work with the brands that also then make sense for direct-to-consumer. For Burt's Bees, we have personalized lip balm. So that's an example. You can only buy it from Burt's Bees because you type in your message, we print it for you, and so it's become this great gifting item. That's, again, like a use case where it can make sense to have direct-to-consumer, so it's continuing to push the businesses to think in that way.
So I'm sure we have some vendors in the room, we have some technology platforms maybe watching the recording of this. If you were missing something in your stack, if there was something that would really complete, right, your needs, what would it be? What would your message be to some folks out there on what needs to be built that you could use some help with?
It's an interesting one. I think creative. I think that's a big gap for a lot of in-house marketers on how do you build enough creative at scale that is relevant to consumers. And I really think there's a ton of like applications that technology can help with that, but it also has to be in a way that like allows the brand to be comfortable that it's not going to be some like rogue piece of creative out there. So I think that's like a very specific ask. I think beyond that, it's really just understanding what are the core pain points that marketers are having. It's not like, it's a lot harder to just say like, do a one-for-one swap of a solution you already have because we already built processes around that. How can we do a swap if it, that actually adds additional value that maybe we don't know? It's kind of like we don't know what we don't know. And it's, I put the emphasis on the vendors and the technology providers to come to really understand our business and understand the challenge and like bring the solution to me instead of me having to be proactive.
And then finally, I'd say, how about 3 predictions for 2023? Maybe in your business, but also macro level digital media industry, channel, spend, invention, innovation?
I think one is that I think I believe we're in a period where the pendulum had swung so far into performance marketing, performance media was the only thing that mattered. And so if you had a strong ROAS, efficient customer acquisition, it kind of didn't matter what you had to do to get there, what the creative was, like that was king at the table. I think it's starting to swing back because consumers are demanding better experience, want data and privacy, but also want personalized messaging. And so I think it starts to be, I think we're going to start to see more emphasis in this way. That's not just about like the financial metrics and the ROAS. So I think that's one. The other piece, and it's something we're doing, I think in this time of we're all kind of in this like economic uncertainty and there's a bunch of new channels coming on. What we're actually focusing on is shoring up the foundational technology and making sure that we have strong site performance and core web vitals, SEO foundations, leaning into CRM, I think is the other one. I think there's so much potential for having better engaged one-to-one consumer journeys through CRM that I think you're going to start seeing marketing teams kind of also start shifting a little bit away from the focus on paid, where it's been for a long time, into owned and operated channels.
And who's going to win the World Cup?
Wrong person to ask.
Same here. Well, thank you so much for the time. I think we are at our time, but it's been great.
Thank you. And it's just, if anybody have any questions?
I was curious, as it pertains to marketplaces, what your sort of posture is there as a direct-to-consumer brand as we see more retailers opening those up, and maybe for some brands that becoming a sales channel for you.
It's a great question. We are certainly testing and interested in seeing like what the potential is there. What we're trying to figure out is like, can it be more than just a distribution channel? Is it actually enable new audiences? How do we understand more about those audiences? I think it's tied in a little bit with like, I'm really interested in retail media networks to say like, okay, if we're having a conversation with Walmart, not just Walmart Marketplace, but also like the medium, how do we almost do a full funnel consumer journey that's within the Walmart ecosystem, in addition to direct-to-consumer, in addition to brand. I think that's kind of the direction that we'll end up moving.
Anyone else?
Hi. I'm curious that obviously Clorox is a legacy brand. Everybody knows who you are. But I'm curious how your overall marketing strategy has changed now that you're moving into direct-to-consumer. I know you mentioned Gen Z and TikTok and things like that. So I'm curious, are you using because I also come from the world of, D2C influencer partnerships. So I'm curious, are you, focusing on strategic partnerships or, maybe doing authentic experiences that provide that education into, the direct-to-consumer channels, or how that's changed your strategy?
Yeah, it's a great question. We're absolutely leaning more into influencer and creator voices. Again, on that, the need for content. That's a huge value add for us. But then also we're seeing the results on brand awareness, brand consideration, engagement, and so forth. I mean, one of the changes that direct-to-consumer brings, actually less about direct-to-consumer, but it's we have performance media folks who actually really understand how do you operate Facebook, Google, programmatic, and so forth. And we're now building media plans that have bottoms-up performance and then also top-down reach, frequency type brand buys, whereas in the past it was really just the brand advertising side of things. And so we may be playing in the same channels, but we're looking at it both from the brand awareness all the way down to consideration and engagement. And so that's been one of the bigger shifts of what we're doing on the marketing side.
I have a question. Actually, I worked at Unilever for a long time, and I was actually there when we bought Dollar Shave Club. And it's still, the DTC part of their overall business is still under 10%. Well, how are you guys as it relates to a ratio there? Is it still a small part of the overall Clorox business, or is it getting much more?
It depends on the sector, I would say, right? So for traditional CPG, like the cleaning brands, for let's say Brita, it's still small percentages. For something like supplements, or even for Burt's Bees, wellness and beauty, we have a lot of consumers who are used to buying online, and so then it's a much heavier focus. But again, I think one of the learnings and the pivots we made along the way, it's not necessarily that we need direct-to-consumer to be this quarter of revenue for Clorox.com. I don't know that we would ever get there. Instead, it's what are the insights and what's the power of the data that we can then feed into the overall funnel, and that impacts revenue at a macro level. That's not directly attributed to D2C as a channel.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right, guys, anybody else? If not, thank you so much. That was excellent.